And as technology evolved, you know, the phone company became a pretty cool place to work. And for a long time, the best research in the world was done at Bell Labs, and airlines were super prestigious. Again, speed, connectivity, being able to go from one place to another so easily. And now sometimes it feels when you're on an overcrowded plane like you're just on a fancy bus. I don't know. It's a Greyhound of the skies. And so from a historical perspective, it's kind of really interesting to see, what's happened in the past and say, like, where are companies like, Google, Apple, and Microsoft headed, and how long can they sustain the interest? And I debated whether to put Facebook in this list. I don't know if I can put it there until it's a little bit more profitable. But yeah, I don't feel it's going to go away. But definitely, Google, Apple, and Microsoft are places that I think a lot of people consider pretty cool to work at, and there's a lot of competition to get in. So I wanted to, wrap this particular part up with those questions about like what it means to be cutting edge, and how long can you sustain that, and are there any businesses that can last as long as, say, IBM has already? Will Google last that long? Will anything last another 100 years? It feels like the... Mm-hmm.
Technology company or any business in general?
Well, I mean, I tend to feel like technology right now is sort of the cutting edge. So there's definitely all sorts of companies, but if you think about sort of innovation and new things that are coming out, they're tending to come out of high tech, and other areas are actually often taking what's been learned in the high tech space and applying it in lower tech environments. I always laugh when I see people predicting 5 or 10 years into the future, because I have a hard time imagining 2 years into the future, and it feels to me like we're in a time period where the emergence of the web has made technological change actually that much faster. And the reason I put this slide together was just to sort of say, now more than ever it pays to be agile, because the rate of change is so fast, and it pays to sort of have that spirit of being able to move quickly, to be able to react to change quickly, because we're right in the middle of a sea of change. Cool. So, getting back to software, I've said a little bit about why I think Agile matters, because I think that things are changing so fast. An example I wanted to sort of bring up that a lot of people might not know about is that IMEM actually started out as client software, and we had a peer-to-peer file exchange system that used small client databases, and the data model was set up in such a way that if you merged all of those client databases together, you had a sort of universal picture of the entire data set. But there was not meant to be a single catalog that maintained all of the data. And we migrated ultimately from a peer-to-peer client to a web-based design where all of the data got centralized. But because of the data model, we were able to do that without changing anything. In fact, the schema on the server side really only had a couple more things in it than the schema on the client side. And in particular, the one thing that it did have in addition to or beyond the client databases were the login database, so all of the user account database. So, we made a business decision when we saw that more people were using IMEME on the web than using IMEME on the client, and we were able to manage that transition very smoothly because the data model basically allowed it. I think, one of the things that I've, brought up before is that there's a lot of unpredictability when you're doing cutting-edge development, and lessons that, one company has learned may not map directly onto what it is you're doing. And oftentimes, you might not learn about other companies' failures until you experience the same failures yourself. One of the things that I thought would be really interesting to mention briefly about that is that almost all of the companies that are, really successful now have probably about a 2 or 3 year period that you don't know about. And so, for instance, Twitter's a great example. I read in an article yesterday that it's a 3-year-old company, but in fact, its roots go back quite a bit farther. And basically, I think anybody who tries to imitate an already successful company is in trouble, because they're not realizing all that went on before those companies made it and became successful. So there's kind of a tip of the iceberg kind of effect where you really don't see a lot of what went into making a company work at the beginning. And precisely a lot of these scalability problems are ones that you don't get a lot of visibility into. So Agile practices just makes it easy to deal with a problem as it happens, compared to any other way of doing things. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a tool Nazi. I really believe in using what works, and I actually, am teaching this course primarily with the Java platform in mind. But in the 5 years prior to this, I was coding mostly in the .NET platform, and I don't really have strong preferences one way or another. But I do definitely feel that Java has a couple of real advantages right now for scalability and for small teams growing into larger teams quickly. Cool. And things that really matter with those tools is reducing friction, increasing communication, and basically making individuals less indispensable. I think if you've got a good set of tools and a good set of practices in place, it reduces the level at which any individual person is completely indispensable to an organization. I mentioned pair programming in a joke last week. Pair programming is a very difficult practice to learn. I didn't list it on the valuable team practices because I'm still ambiguous about it. I think it has some really good aspects to it, and one of the best things I've seen with pair programming is that it makes sure that there's no piece of code that only one person understands. And so, if someone calls in sick and something's crashed, there's always going to be someone there who can deal with it. But the pain of getting pair programming to work can sometimes outweigh that benefit. So it's really, I don't know, something I hesitate to sort of enforce as an important practice.
So what kind of like